Township Committee, February 5th, 2018. The notice requirements provided for in the Open Public Meetings Act have been satisfied. Notice of this meeting was properly given by transmission to the Star Ledger, the Independent, and the Trooper Times by posting at the Middletown Township Municipal Building and filing with the Township Clerk on January 18, 2018. Committeeman Fiore.
Here.
Committeeman Perry.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sedambrino. Mayor Murray. Here. Please rise for the pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just want to note for the record at this time that Committeeman Scharfenberger has resigned effective February 3rd, 2018. And he will be missed. Okay. First item on tonight's agenda, we have a public hearing on proposed ordinance 2018-3214 for the 2018 salary ordinance.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? Yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh, is there anyone wishing to speak to 2018-3214? Yes.
That's not. I think I need to stand. Just a couple quick questions.
Name and address.
I'm sorry, it's been a while. Linda Baum, 19 May Court, in Middletown. So, a couple quick questions. One had to do, there's a listing of the township committee members receiving salary, but it doesn't actually say who. Now, you just mentioned that Dr. Scharfenberger actually just left. So I know that previously he wasn't receiving, so it doesn't apply to him. So does every township committee member receive salary now, or will they be?
Not salary, right? It's a stipend.
Okay. All right, so the other question is, often the reason to receive a stipend or salary is to be eligible for health benefits. So will all of the members be receiving health benefits?
None of us have ever been eligible for health benefits.
We did an ordinance probably
Or the pension.
almost 10 years ago on that.
Okay, well, fine, all right, that's good, thank you. The only other question had to do with appointed professionals who are receiving salary. Do you know if any of them are also receiving health benefits by the township?
None.
None of the ones that are listed here under Section 3? Okay. The only other question I had to do with the tax collector, and this, I just haven't been keeping up, I guess, with things. I see shared service for tax collector, 12,000. Can somebody tell me about that?
We do a shared service with Fairhaven, right?
Yeah, we entered into a shared service last year for tax collector, tax collector, CFO, and QPA.
Okay. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to 2018-32? Yes, Leo. Name and address, please.
Leo Christopherly, Shady Oaks, Middletown. I have one question, well, a couple of questions, maybe more. What's the scheduled grades and/or steps for ranked policemen?
They're not part of the salary ordinance, Leo, so we can't really discuss that.
Can we get a printout through Oprah of the top to bottom salaries that are under contracts?
You can get a copy of the contract.
Can we get a list of contracts?
You can
The-
put a contract, right?
The contracts list the salary steps for police officers.
Individual ones, you don't have a list?
You'd have to Oprah that, because individual...
But if it's not existing, you don't have to get it together for me. So then can I get all the contracts? Do I have to get all the contracts to get the information I'm after?
All the contracts are actually on the Clerk website. All contracts.
I don't have a computer.
But yeah, you can over it, yes.
Okay, thank you. What recommendations is the township administrator continuing or has decided to make on this ordinance that we are holding a hearing on?
I recommend salary for all management and appointed positions in the township. That's reviewed by the Township Committee, and ultimately the decision's made on all of those people in those categories. It's basically based on work, work performance. And
Could you entertain a recommendation that no colon should emanate, be generated by this committee, governing committee in Middle Township for any government employee unless the federal government gives the citizens in New Jersey a COLA increase in the same year? In other words, we're paying for it. I'm a private citizen, retired, living in Shady Oaks. There's probably another 1,000 over at Shadow Lake. There's about 1,400 of us. We're paying these salaries. If we don't get a COLA, and we're on fixed incomes, I assume, most of us, if not all of us, I don't think in fact, the whole state of New Jersey should be doing this, but if it could be stopped at this level, I'd be appreciated. Is that a consideration?
I would say, from my perspective, with inflation projections of anywhere to 2 to 2.5% in 2018, from everything I've read and anything you look up, or 1.9 to 2.5%, I think it'll be closer to the median. From my perspective, Leo, I don't agree with the fact that the federal government doesn't give you a COLA increase. I don't agree with the fact that the state of New Jersey, if you were a public employee, which I believe you may have been in the past, isn't giving you a COLA increase. But to me, that's not policy that's good policy for me to pass, at least from my perspective, on to this municipality, just because the federal government and the state, which oftentimes passes bad policy, should dictate to the employee workforce when, the pace of inflation, which I think these raises kind of mirror the pace of inflation. That's the way I think about if I have to give salary. I think you should get a COLA increase, but the fact is I'm not going to punitively punish my decision based on bad policy by the Fed and or the state. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I think it's very, very mindful and it's very well thought in my perspective. But to me, I think that's asking for my vote to be punitive because of the wrongs of the federal and state government. I don't necessarily agree with
It's
that.
not punitive, it's a matter of...
You're asking me to dictate bad policy like the feds and the state. We both agree that you should get a COLA increase, but I can't make that policy change. I can only affect what I can affect. But ultimately, I can affect your total tax increase, which hopefully is less than the rate of inflation.
Well, then if you're going to... One last question or observation, please. I think if this is a hearing, you can extend me beyond 5 minutes in a hearing. All right, thank you, Mayor. My concern is I have an article here. I think I got seven copies. I'll pass them around. Saturday, February 3rd, Asbury Park. New Jersey may spin off, meaning transfer pension funds from management to a trustee, 12-member trustee, to some kind of commission or panel that will be comprised of 12, I already said 12 members, 7 of them are union members. I think this should be, I think it's in the county level, Monmouth County, I think it's in this body. This should be a no-go. This would create a regulatory administration. By analogy, there are 74 administrative regulatory agencies in the federal government under the executive branch. Congress has brought them into existence like the FBI. They can put them out of existence, Justice Department, whatever you want, 74 of them, and they're running the economy of the federal government out of sight because, like the last comment, the Consumer Financial Protection Board was unconstitutionally enacted by federal fiat, executive order. The money that's paid for it is not generated out of the Congress, which it has to come from the House of Representatives. It's now being paid out of the Federal Reserve. They have no money. They have no money. They sell securities, mortgage securities, and they float bonds to the Treasury. The Treasury sends them the money, and it's future tax increases. It's going to be paid by taxes. It's up to $4.5 trillion, last I heard.
Leo, respectfully, I'm going to let you finish your thought, but we really have to stick to the salary ordinance. If it's not about the salary ordinance, we can, you could talk again during public comments, but.
Yeah, well, this is about salary. It's about the police salary.
Is
But
that
But it's not, we're
Police
not
salary's
doing
not part
police
of the
salary
salary
tonight.
ordinance.
Well, now let me ask you one last question then, because what your comment raises a question in my mind, and it is, when are we going to talk about the police salary and contracts?
We can do
You know,
that in
Is there
public.
going to be an open hearing in that? I bet you there won't. Powerful union, unless there's a contrary answer.
Well,
Well, first of all contract negotiations are done in closed sessions privately. There's no public participation in contract negotiations. And any contract, not police or otherwise, blue collar, white collar workers, they're all done outside of the public arena. That's the law. That's the way the process works. Ultimately, when a contract is agreed to, there's a public process whereby the Township Committee approves of a contract, and you're free to comment on that at a public hearing, or you're free to comment on what you think should be done about contracts at any public meeting. But there's nothing public about contract negotiations for anybody. That's just the way the law works.
Leo, but about the Asbury Park Press article, is that about the PFRS, that legislation that they were talking about today in Trenton?
Why don't you pass those out?
Yeah.
so Leo, just to clarify my colleague's question, are you asking us to entertain a potential resolution in opposition to that legislation?
I'm opposed
Okay.
to the police getting that kind of political power and legislative power.
So,
I'm utterly opposed to it. My analogy is the 74 regulatory agencies. I cited the Financial Protection Board. It is a disaster. Complete and total disaster.
So what we can do is we can talk to our legislators and get more research and detail on this, and then we can consider a potential resolution in opposition potentially. So that's what we will.
And I'll have my weapons called a telephone.
Gotcha.
It may be a pen, and I'll try to contact the same people you contact. I'll try to be very polite and smileful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to 2018-3214? Okay, seeing no members of the public wishing to speak to 2018-3214, move to close public portion. Hands up. Second.
Committeeman Fiore.
Yes.
Committeeman Perry.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sedambrino.
Yes.
Mayor Murray.
Yes.
Motion carries to adopt this ordinance on the second and final reading. At this time, I'd like to ask the Township Committee to adopt the consent agenda, which would include resolutions 18-84 through 18-90. Committeeman Fiore.
Yes.
Committeeman Perry.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sedambrino.
Yes.
Mayor Murray.
Yes.
Motion carries to adopt the consent agenda. Discussion items tonight. We have, first item, the agenda memo for our COLA ordinance.
The COLA ordinance is something we do annually as part of the budget cycle. It is an ordinance that we pass to allow us to raise our appropriation cap limit from whatever is set. This year it's set at 2.5%, we can raise it to 3.5%. We don't use it, it's not something that we use normally. We just do it every year because it allows us to bank whatever we don't use, so that if something were to move from outside to inside or something, we have some flexibility there. If we have a large inside the cap appropriation that increases, we have flexibility, but it's really just a safety net. So, and it's really the only way you can bank your appropriation limit that you don't use year over year. So if you're okay with that, I'll write it up and we'll introduce it at the next meeting.
Thanks, Colleen.
We have the Discover New Jersey History License Plate Grant application.
It's called that. It's not about license plates.
Yeah.
It's not about license plates.
So we applied for this last year.
It's how we got the grant for the historic
Yeah, so it's coming around again.
tours in the village, so now it's coming up.
So now the
for-
plan is to do it for
Madison.
another one of our other historic districts. We'll try to do the same type of thing, set up some tours. So we're just letting you know, we're going to reapply for that
So we
same
won't be
grant.
seeing a visit Navesink.
No.
No. Like I thought whenever.
Okay. We have the Enabling Green Acres project for multi-park improvements.
Yeah, so I'd like to discuss this one, so if you want to, if anyone wants to start off.
So we did receive a grant from Green Acres for playground upgrades and park improvements. And we had if you remember, we had a laundry list of projects, and we have some options within how we're going to do that. And I think maybe, what we ought to do is kind of give you a list of options that we can consider. We have, next month, we need to decide how we're going to proceed. We've spoken to Green Acres about this. So the amount of money that we've already been awarded, we could simply use that amount. It was $339,000.
But isn't it contingent on us matching this at $3 to $3? It's not contingent.
No, what it is the option is, it's a 25% grant, 75% loan. So whatever we decide to do as a project, we could decide, for example, that the amount of money that was awarded, I think it was $369. We could decide that we're going to use a loan for 75% of that, and Green Acres will give us 25% of that, as a direct grant.
So that at a 326, we would get 100.
369.
369, we get 25% of 369, we have to take a loan for it, or we get?
No, take a loan for the 75%. And
I'm not following.
In other words, we get a grant of 25% of that amount, of 369.
Okay, so you're
And
going to get a
the
grant
remainder
of
portion,
$75,000.
Yeah, the remainder, we would get a Green Acres loan, which generally have pretty good terms, a little bit better
So it's like
than.
you're being approved up to a certain number.
Yeah, now again, if we want to do, the original project we came up with is about $1.4 million. If we want to do everything, we could do that, and then $369,000 would be that 25% grant, and we'd have to do a loan for the remainder, about
For
$1 million.
how long is
That's
that
20
loan?
years.
20 years, so it's $1 million, so it's,
It's 2%, 20
so
years.
how much a year is
I think it
this?
was about 90,000 a year.
90,000 a year.
What was that one?
Yeah,
Wow, 90,000 a year.
Nora?
I got it.
Nora Hatch.
Now, do they front in the wonderful world of Green Acres grants?
The
Do
magical
they
phrase.
front this 25%? Do we hope to get
Have to
this
lay it out?
25%?
No, this
at
is
some point?
guaranteed. This money is guaranteed you get, but you have to spend it and to complete the projects, then you get the full 25%.
And it's not you do it and you hope to get the money back?
No, it's not like buying property. It's not like their Green Acres acquisition program, which is much riskier. This one is directly funded. The township has done this once before, some years ago. It's how we actually got the property that the art center's on.
So how is it, so if we were to agree to spend $90,000 a year for the next 20 years,
It's about 70,000.
okay, if we were to agree to take $70,000 a year for 20 years, would we get the $300,000, well, the first $300,000 is paid? How does this work?
No, it's reimbursement.
It's reimbursement as you go.
So it's reimbursement as you go. So how do you designate what's reimbursed versus what's paid out?
we would have to finance all of it, and we would get that 25% back as a grant.
Guaranteed to
Yes,
get to
guaranteed.
25%.
Yeah, there'll be a grant agreement that we'll have to do.
Or we can walk away from the loan.
Yeah, or we can totally walk away. I mean, if we decide not to do it.
Like we take the loan and then we can just say, you're not giving us your 25%
For example,
back, we're going to default on the loan.
No, they,
Well, I just don't have a lot of trust in
Yeah.
the way Green Acres operates. We
Yeah.
gotta hope that they have the money for it.
no, this program is, the money's there, and you're guaranteed to get it. Now, look, that's the way things work right now. Could that change in a few years? I suppose it possibly could, but that's the way it works now.
You're thinking the way I am.
So Committeeman Fury is speaking very inventively. Now, so the 369,
Yeah.
25% is a grant, but it's a reimbursement, right? And it's not to exceed 369. The only thing I was confused on was, you'd mentioned 369 as 25% of a larger number, but that's not the case.
It is.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so clarify.
The original program that we submitted to Green Acres was approximately $1.4 million.
Okay, so
369 is about 25% of that.
369 is 25% of that 369, one quarter of it is eligible to us as a grant, the other 75%, where's the 25 is a straight.
The 369
25 is
is
a straight
25.
grant.
Whatever amount of
I got it.
money we decide to spend,
I got it.
we get 25% in grant,
Right.
75% loan.
Right, okay.
So we could do the whole $1.4 million worth, or we could do $1 million worth, or we could do $500,000 worth. We're in control of that, and we can change it as we go, because we could put in for the $1.4 million, and then 2 years into it, they say, you know what, we're not going to really ever get to
And
the rest of this, and we can
the
drop
grant
it.
is a reimbursement to reduce the debt.
Yeah.
No, it's in
Against the
addition to
principal.
that. We would get a grant, and theoretically, we would get a grant for 369, and we would do a loan for 1.1 million, making our total 1.4. So the 1.1 million would be the amount that we have. The 369 would be the balance of those projects.
Right, you can do 1.4 million for 1.4 million dollars project for 1.1 million.
So only need to finance the loan.
Yeah, and if you remember, we had a long list of pretty significant projects in town, doing some really major improvements to the parks. The Green Acres Loan Program is a very good one if you get into it, because there are good financing terms.
How did we get this grant? Was it our grant writer? What is it, how did
They
it come?
did the grant application
They
for
did.
us, yes.
That's good. We paid their salary.
Yeah, they have. So we'll send you on that, we'll send you a list of the projects again, and you'll have to let us know,
We'll be able to prioritize and.
prioritize
change
the
around.
projects, and maybe that amount, shifts around a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, so for purchasing, we have the bid for recreation bus trips. And then we have the master plan reexamination.
Yeah.
Good evening. I hope all of you read my two-page memo. Do you have any questions? Do you want me to go through anything?
Summarize why we're doing this.
Highlights, yeah.
Okay, please. So the primary purpose of a master plan re-exam report is to evaluate changes in a municipality and to determine whether the master plan and the related development ordinances are still relevant and appropriate. And our master plan was done in 2004, so almost 14 years ago, and subsequently re-examined in 2009, 2011, and 2014. The 2014 one was taken into consideration Irene and Superstorm Sandy, and it was to address that. Now, since the past 4 years, there have been other changes in the municipality. We've identified redevelopment areas. We're looking to spur economic development, so on and so forth. So what the master plan really does is it's the guiding document for our zoning ordinances. So our zoning ordinances are the one that really enable the policies that are put in the master plan in terms of how we would want businesses to go. So taking a look at the master plan and even evaluating our ordinances would be necessary. So for example, certain uses are obsolete because a telephone operator, for example, was a use that made sense 30 years ago. It's obsolete now.
We still list video
So,
stores.
video stores. So a part of the re-exam process would be also taking a look at chapter 540, which is what we're going to do.
What's the minimum requirement for a re-exam?
Well, by statute, originally it was every 6 years, and then in 2010, 2011, they changed it to every 10 years. But that is for municipalities that did not have a master plan approval. It doesn't mean that you have to wait for 10 years. You could do this when you feel when the town feels the necessity to do that. And most importantly for us, we have an in-house planning department. So
this will be in-house.
absolutely.
Does this master plan re-examination also cover in exempted use in terms for, you know,
Site
tax?
plan.
Well, not just site plan, so for example, how do I explain this? You know, obviously in the master plan and in land use laws, you can have residential areas that are considered churches, right? Does this also take into does the master plan re-examination you're looking at also take into consideration as to what we would deem the appropriate level of space versus, you know, a whole this building, you know, if you had a house that someone was saying was going to be used as a religious
Yeah, that's an
thing,
issue we can address.
You can address that,
We
so-
can address,
So
right.
you can exempt the prayer room, but not the whole house, so to speak, if our ordinance doesn't do that. Is that something that?
We could address that,
I think
yes.
that should be something that should be addressed.
We also are going to be looking, we have a meeting a week
On
from Friday. Is that a week from
No,
Friday?
this Friday.
Is it this Friday?
Yeah, we're looking at the planning, building construction, as well as engineering, all the ordinances. So the master plan would even examine those shortcomings. So we really want to work hard to make to address any inconsistencies or contradictions in the different...
Yeah, one of the areas is like code, a lot of code enforcement things, that we think our ordinances can be a little bit tighter on dealing with abandoned properties and substandard
And I
properties.
remember the
and-
tax assessor at one point had some issues with respect to the properties I'm trying to bring forward because our ordinance was not
Right.
very clear as to what could be exempted versus not.
The result of this is going to be a lengthy ordinance. It's going to have a lot of stuff in it, but it'll bring a lot of things up to speed.
And it's a
It'll be worth it.
worthwhile exercise. And and I'm hoping with, at the end of the re-exam report to determine if we need a full-fledged master plan, which would be probably for 2019. And even that, I hope to do it in-house. The 2004 master plan was done in-house.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Stan.
But we do need a resolution from you.
Oh, yes.
For the next
So
meeting.
for next meeting, I will prepare a resolution and send it to
Directing
Brian's
that we do this.
for his review. So you need to adopt that resolution directing the planning board to conduct a master plan re-examination. All right.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay. Our next item, we have the shared service agreement for animal control.
It's just they shared the, we have a draft share service agreement similar to the one that we have with tablets for animal control for the time, right?
Yep, $18,000 a year, saves Highlands money. It's something we can pick up within our geographic area, and we do a really good job. Homedale and Hazlitt re-upped with us this year, so they're both happy with the service they're getting, and I'm sure Highlands will be
It's the
also.
same ordinance that we have, right? Just
It's virtually the same agreement,
Basically the same
except for
agreement.
the amount, and the only difference is, it's 1 year with an option for the second year. In the past, we've done them with for 2 years, with an option for a third year. But since this is new to them, they were a little bit more cautious, so they wanted to just do 1 year with a second-year option.
We do great work in animal control.
They really
Really
do. Yep.
They're great.
We have the no-knock registration.
Okay, I'm just going to mention, one of the reasons why the Township Committee had entertained this in the past, bringing it up again because members of the community have been interested in getting something like this on our books. So it's here tonight, so I don't know if anybody has any opinions of, well, Brian, maybe if you would like to just say what the parameters happen to be. It's not just prevention from anyone knocking on the door.
Yeah, I mean, and as some of you may recall from this was discussed a few years ago, I mean, so a no-knock registry, and we already have certain licensing, basically people have to register already if they're going out door to door soliciting, what have you, so that when the police get calls, they know who is out there, and get some general, background information basically from them. No-knock registry is something that would be a list basically maintained by the township, which would be handed out to those people who come in for a license to go door to door. They would then be directed not to, solicit those doors in a particular list. You can have stickers that people put on their front window, front doorstep, what have you. There's different ways that, you do that. That will not, however, restrict any, it's still, you can't just restrict certain nonprofit entities and political candidates from knocking on doors. Those are things that could, so people still may be upset about that, but, but people can still do it. So it's, for solicitors, I mean, for commercial, really to address commercial businesses soliciting door to door.
And it's optional.
And it's optional, for the individual household, whether or not they want to, be on the registry.
Right, exactly,
So-
exactly.
So for maintenance of the fee and an annual sticker, is the township allowed to charge a fee for this?
Well,
Registry.
like anything else,
Like we
you
do
can
with
charge a
ordinance.
fee to cover a cost, an actual cost, so, obviously there would be some sort of administrative expense. Somebody would have to be somebody's job to maintain the list, to do the registrations, to hand
To
the
buy the
list out
stickers.
to the people,
Produce the
to
stickers.
do
How do you
the
buy the
stickers,
stickers?
to purchase the
I
stickers.
think it needs to get replaced over time
And,
too.
you know,
I think
They
it
would
worn
have to
out.
be
Well, I think
replaced
it should
every
be
year,
an
but you
annual,
don't want to
Jeff,
go
you
on
probably-
next year,
right, you
you
probably
know?
change
Oh, so it's an annual
Right.
sticker.
Yes,
sticker.
it would have
Well,
to
you
be,
could do-
because what if you don't want to do it the year after?
What if you move?
So,
Right.
somebody's, it'll have to be somebody's job to maintain this list, to hand it out to whoever, the licensees, that are doing this activity, and to, so you can charge a reasonable fee to cover those costs, just like any other fee,
What's the applicability with like cable TV? Like Fios is one they come around a lot.
Yeah,
I'm
you
not-
can't, if you have a no-knock. I don't think
They're not subject,
Verizon
are they
can't.
subject to it?
I would have to see if there's some special
There might be a
cable
exception
TV
for-
regulation, because they have
Utilities
certain
or something.
franchise rights, and utilities are treated somewhat differently in certain instances. I'll have
I
to
mean,
look at
the
that specific
support
question.
that I've seen for this really centers around random solicitors.
Mm-hmm.
People in the community don't seem, if they want the option of letting people know before you get to the door, don't solicit my home.
So Brian,
So-
sorry.
No,
So
no.
Brian, would a group like Clean Water Action, who rings my doorbell quite often, be exempt from this no-knock registry?
No, arguably they could, it's similar to political.
That's what I mean, so they'd be
Yeah,
exempt
from Clean Ocean Action?
Yeah,
Clean water.
Clean
Water
Clean
Action.
Water Action, Ocean
But they
Action,
come to my door too.
yeah.
Constantly.
Very aggressive too.
Very aggressive.
They do it in all the
So-
towns.
So they would
Every year.
potentially
I live on a private
be
street and they
excluded
still knock on the door,
from this
yeah.
ordinance if they were a political, so a political action committee may be able to be.
Yeah, political candidates, committees, things like
So-
that, not
so
certain
I would
nonprofits.
say-
Scouts, Girl Scouts?
Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts.
So
maybe.
non-for-profits, are non-for-profits exempt from a no-knock ordinance?
And certain instances, I mean,
Girl Scouts.
there's a lot of different,
Scouts.
but generally speaking, yes.
Okay.
And there's also
so-
veterans, there's specific exemptions for
So-
veterans, believe it or not, which I didn't realize till years ago, they actually have cards that are issued by the county clerk for veterans. And things like that. So there's a lot of exceptions
So
in their various parts
if
of the
we
laws.
were to put this ordinance in effect, which I don't propose, although I do feel that there's enough, as we've discussed many times in the past, there's probably enough loopholes to drive a truck through it. I would want to entertain a fee annually, because there's gonna be an administrative cost of a sticker and a registry. And I would want a letter to go with anybody who registers annually that explains exactly what this is, potentially who's exempt, and that enforcement is not the town clerk's issue or the town administrator's issue. If you have somebody knocking on your door and you tell them and you have the sticker, you call the non-emergency number of the police department, because that's who has to enforce this. We're not enforcing, because I could just see an instance where these kind of groups come in and then they're knocking down Heidi's door because she gave a sticker and you're supposed to maintain a registry. I think that's, so the police are the enforcement mechanism, are they not, Brian?
Should
In
code-
the police
Code
department,
enforcement.
can this be something maintained by the police department? Is that a natural?
Well, they
place
are,
to put it?
because you have to get a permit to go in anyway.
Could be.
I don't know
We
who
can figure it
currently
out.
deals with our permit issuance, and I don't know if it's the clerk's.
But I could just see
Police.
residents getting very upset if they
Police
don't understand the ordinance, they pay a nominal, small fee to be on it, they think that no one can knock on their door, and then they're sending emails to the administrator saying, hey, people are in my neighborhood, that's not, you can't enforce this.
Well, it's going to be very difficult to enforce in
I
general,
agree.
just because by the time, the police, let's just say, get there, the person's going to be gone, most likely. So,
But, I think the thought is, and it has been done in other towns, I think the intent is that you get the list. If you're a solicitor, if you have a license, you're gonna get the list, and you're gonna know, oh, okay, there's a sticker a mile away, I'm not even gonna bother approaching that house.
Right.
And you know what, that might even be better for the solicitors also, don't waste my time at this house, I'm not gonna bother.
There's definitely a.
the thing that probably we could do would be probably every now and then create a list of the groups that are exempt and the groups that aren't.
I'm
that
on the
we're aware
national
of.
do not call list,
Because-
and I still get calls.
For example, if you're a resident and you have the sticker, maybe you don't know that Clean Water Action is exempt, let's just say they are.
That's
So
why you
maybe we have a list available on the web that says,
But that's also when you register, you should be given,
Yeah.
these types of
maybe you do that every
organizations
time you
are.
re-register.
Every time you re-register.
That's the only place I see confusion, is the ones that kind of are allowed, but the average person might not necessarily
And
know
what
that they're
steps to
allowed.
follow, if you
Right,
feel that
exactly.
someone's knocking and they shouldn't, dial the non-emergency
Right.
number of the police department.
Right.
Call them up.
Right, it's a enhanced security to some
Yes,
degree.
you're right.
These folks that are gonna be, that wanna be a part of this list, they have that sense of security that any organization that has gone and through the process of coming to the town, they know who to go and who not to go. So, who to knock on their door and who not to. So if you do get a knock at the door and you feel uncomfortable, you know that this person probably hasn't been to town hall and understands the process and procedures that we've already set in place. So I think you bring that sense of security, which is always good.
I think we'd have to clarify too in the ordinance that it's available for occupants of a residence, right? For example, if you're a renter, you're still
Yeah.
able to get that. If you live in an apartment, you're still able to get it. Right?
Yeah, but here's what I'll tell you, to Committeeman Fury's point, I don't want to extend the liability of the township with regard to a no-knock list and a misunderstanding of what that entitles that no-knock list holder to. If we get a call or PD gets a call, they say, okay, look, I want you to come, this guy's at my door, you shouldn't be at the door, and they haven't evaluated it properly. I don't want that liability to sit on the town, so I'll make sure that that's done. And you can hand out that list, the explanation to people every year. It'll change every single
And you
year.
could post it on the website.
So that would be my
You have it
only
at the police
concern.
desk.
You could have it at the police desk.
So they get a call from someone, who is it? Oh, they're on the list, they're allowed to be there.
Right, and they could look it right up.
Right.
It's a good idea.
When the police have that list, they
No, it makes perfect
already have
sense.
the police list.
Very logical.
You need a number of the police desk.
Yeah, that's what's gonna have to happen. But I think it's a good idea.
All right, great.
Okay, our next item, we have the proposed parking restrictions for various streets.
Can I just ask, and I spoke to Maureen about this one, Tony, so I don't know if you've gotten further clarification on this list, but Apple Farm between Hamiltonian and Route 35, if there is no restriction already, I'd like to see it added to this list. If there is a restriction, which Maureen says that I believe she told me last time there is a restriction, and I want signage up there that says no parking.
There's a 200-foot one now, but there aren't signs for it. So we can put some signs on it, and we could extend, it
200
doesn't go
feet.
to Hamiltonian.
Okay, so I'd like to put it to Hamiltonian, so I'd like
Right.
to add that if it's 200 feet, because I do believe what's happening is that between the medical office there and the Sunrise Assisted Living, people were parking, at least the neighbors have told me in that neighborhood, they're parking there. You actually can see the mud from them parking in the weeds over there.
Yeah,
So, and it is, when you're taking that circle, when there's cars on both sides, you can't.
right.
I think a few of them, I asked the police to go out and survey some of the license plates out there to try to get a sense of who they are. I think a couple might also be people going to the bus stop.
It could
Because the bus stop almost
potentially
right
be
across the
there.
highway, there, just a short distance down to the north, I guess it would be. So I think it's a couple of them of people taking the bus, and they're not supposed to be parking there to do that.
So if we can extend this to
We'll do that.
Hamiltonian, which is the first block,
Mhm.
so then if you could have parking from Hamiltonian further, but not from Hamiltonian to 35.
Okay. And then the others, we're listed, we've talked about Schultz before, that'll be in place. The other one is Appleton near the Leonardo Post Office. There's a lot of commuters parking there, we get a lot of complaints. No, across the highway from the Wawa. By there's a post office there. A lot of commuters park along that road in front of people's houses.
Yeah.
They're there all day. And there's commuter spaces available in the lots, so.
Right.
Okay, great.
Good stuff.
Ready for the next one? Okay.
Opposing legislation of recreational marijuana use.
You want to take that one?
Look, my perspective is, I know we haven't seen final legislation from Trenton. The proposed legislation, I believe, does not benefit the municipalities in terms of potential revenue for what's going to cost us in terms of offset. So I'd like to see, with the committee's approval, I'd like to see an introduction of an ordinance that restricts recreational sale in Middletown Township. That doesn't mean we have to necessarily pass it, but the last thing that until we get further clarification of how the legislation is drafted or any potential changes so we can evaluate, but the last thing I want to see is something I think happens to municipalities all the time, which is that we don't take any action to start, the state comes and makes a change, and then we're told, oh, you can't change the zone because now you're doing you're doing whatever they call it, preemptive zoning or spot, or now you're restricted because you didn't take the first move. So I believe an introduction of an ordinance puts us in the driver's seat to pass an ordinance and be in front of the state, unless I'm completely reading this wrong, which then gives us the right to protection as to if we want to allow this at a later time or not, right? But I think if the state makes the rule first and we try to zone, it's not going to be hard for the courts of the state of New Jersey, as they always do, to legislate from the bench and say, Middletown, you can't do that now. I mean, I just don't trust the process.
It makes perfect sense.
The one question on this, and I
Do
just
you have
have,
the zoning ordinance ready?
No,
I'm just talking about just in general, right?
you probably have to do it both.
Right.
Police
You
power.
tell me how it has to be done, but.
And zoning orders. But the one thing to keep in mind, I just happened to be at a seminar last week, or week before last, and this was one of the topics. And so there's three aspects of it you have to take into account, because there's three components that are going to be permitted by whatever statute ultimately gets passed, if one does. And I still think that's a 50-50 right now. But there's the growing, okay? So we don't want to just address retail sales. We want to
The
address.
county did something about preventing growing.
Well, they just did a resolution.
Yeah, they did
Right.
something.
They did a budget.
But,
They did
and then the other part is
something,
processing, there's three steps. Growing, and then you take the product and process it into something that's, can be purchased, and then there's the retail end of it. So I think if you're gonna do a resolution, if you're gonna introduce an ordinance, I'd address all three in the ordinance, just so that we've got all the bases covered.
That's gotta be addressed in the zoning ordinance.
It would, yeah.
It's gotta designate a
Look,
zone.
it's illegal under state law now and under federal law. So, all of those three, growing, processing, selling, are all legal under federal and state law. So, I mean, it's really, that is already preempted, right? Unless the law changes at the state level, but arguably that's still preempted by federal law. So so really, I mean, I think you're really talking about a zoning ordinance.
Actually, Judge Thornton's gonna throw it out.
Uh,
You know?
No, I know. Well, that's why it's zoning. I mean, that's why that's really, so it's really a zoning ordinance.
But what's
It's
gonna
really-
happen is what's happened with some of our other ordinances. If there's a state or federal statute that preempts us, she's not gonna let us pass an ordinance.
Like, it's not, you
Same
can't
thing.
enter it in the system to find people if it's preempted by
So
federal
these
and
other
state law.
towns that have passed,
They haven't. They've done like
Resolution.
resolutions.
Resolution
It's-
stating a
they're just
position.
taking a position, they're not actually.
We're talking about modification to the zoning.
Yeah, we're talking about zoning changes.
but just
not-
introducing it until we see what the legislation actually,
Well,
we have the right to
could ban it.
if
You
it
could-
even comes down.
you
We could do it now. if we
You
want.
could adopt it and ban it in any zone or whatever, you know.
You could.
Should it
Get
become legal, we've already taken position as a use, it's prohibited here, because I believe the way the legislation is gonna work is, you're not required to
Right.
permit it.
Right.
Now, that could change too.
Yeah.
And then you're just out of luck, but if it's still written that way, then you could enact an
It
ordinance.
gives
like
us a
that.
better chance for in case of a challenge, if we decide we don't want to go through that, if we introduce it now.
It all depends on how they write
Wait a
the
minute,
legislation.
but I also wonder, this is just out of curiosity, just to think of it from a different way. If it is legalized in New Jersey, would they ask towns to do an ordinance to permit it?
They-
The other way
For-
around, you know what I'm saying?
Here's a good
Because-
example, they could do with it what they've done with things like group homes, right? The state law now says, no matter what you do, Middletown, in a residential zone, you have to allow a group home within certain parameters. And no matter what we do in our ordinance,
Right,
the state law says you have to allow them. They could do the same thing with that. That's why I say it really depends on exactly how they write it. They could leave it permissive, so that towns who want to allow it can, and towns who don't. That's kind of the way they're talking about doing it right now.
Yeah, in legislation passed in previous legislative sessions, they have not addressed that issue. The only thing that they've talked about is providing a 6-month period where towns have the right to say, yes, we're going to permit this, and if you go past that 6 months, then it's automatically adopted.
Right.
But you have that six-month opt-out phase.
That's typically
Where
way
the
it's been
town,
done.
has.
And within that, again, you have to look at all three components. A town theoretically could say, we're okay with the agricultural production part, but we don't want the processing or the sales,
Yeah.
or vice versa. You know, you're free to choose however, at least that's the way it's been going so far. And then the other states that have done things like that too.
From my perspective, I think it may never get passed at the state level, but in the current proposal, in my conversation with our Senator Earl Scanlon, is that the state's looking to put a 25% tax on it and give the municipalities 3% of that 25%, which is peanuts. So to me, this is a state revenue issue, which they'll do what they do. I don't feel that this is going to be a property taxpayer benefit
The
in
most
any way,
recent
but,
version has like a three-step increase. It goes from like, say, 10%, then 15%, then 25%.
For the state.
But the municipal part stays at 3%.
Yeah, I think it's 5, actually. Yeah, I think it starts at 10, 15, 20, 25, so four-step process.
Four-step?
But we don't ever get
But our the
Correct,
3%
that
doesn't
remains the
change.
same.
And I think
And
that
it's
should
not
graduate too, by
3%,
the
it's
way.
not 3% of the sale.
It's 3%.
It's 3% of the 25%, so it's
Yeah.
much less of a number. It's a extremely
portion of a
small
smaller
portion. So, yeah, but long story short,
slice of a slice.
unless there's some real economic benefit to Middletown, like giving us our energy receipts tax back, or something that I can get my arms around to help taxpayers, I can't see the benefit of this for the township, but that's my perspective.
One of the issues that was discussed was the issue of security. And for example, there was a guy there who has a bunch of facilities in California, and he said that for the growing facilities, they only have security when there's nobody there, like overnight and things like that. But in the retail outlets, it's 24/7. There's security whether they're open or not. They have armed security there at all the retail outlets. Not required, but they just all
Because
do.
they can't deposit cash. Because it's federally
And
illegal.
it's all cash. It's
Yes.
virtually an all cash
You
business.
cannot put it in a federal
Not
bank that takes
legal to put it in a
FDIC
federal
funds.
bank or.
Right.
Well, which is one of the reasons there's a discussion about a state bank.
That's right, that's
Because they're gonna finance it.
Which better not take FDIC funds.
It won't be able to.
Which
Yeah.
also puts all the taxpayers on the hook.
Yeah, when they go
For
belly
other
up.
states
When
that
they go
want to
belly up.
deposit the funds into.
We wouldn't be the first state with the state bank either. There were states that
Yeah, I
had the
think North
state
Dakota
bank.
has
one.
Ours the only
Yeah,
one.
North
Yes.
Dakota is the only other state.
Yeah, look
But
what's
then
going
they
on.
did it.
We don't have the oil industry that they
That's
have.
right.
They did it,
And they take federal funds,
they did it.
but they can't take that money.
Okay,
That's-
great. This is a good talk.
Yes, a couple other floodplain ordinance.
So the floodplain, we're gonna be introducing a floodplain ordinance. If you remember back in pre-Sandy and then post-Sandy, we had to adopt some new ordinances based on new floodplain maps. The FEMA's finally gone through the whole analysis of the new maps, and we're going back to the old maps. So we just have to amend some things in our ordinance. It doesn't mean anything to any residents in town. If anything, it's a little bit of good news instead of bad news. But we just have to technically change our ordinances to be consistent with the old maps again.
They add additional properties to that, or no?
No, in fact, the newer maps added a whole bunch of V-zone properties, which was really impacting people. This takes that back away, and there's very, very few properties in the V-zone, just the same as there were in the very old versions of maps. So it has virtually no impact on anyone. It's just a technicality, because it gives the building department now the actual maps that they have to utilize when looking at permits and things like that.
Okay, you ready? No?
The train station parking lot lights, that was it.
I just wanted to briefly inform the committee of a program that JCP&L started last year, through which they replace the current streetlights with LED lights. There are two kinds of streetlights evidently out there. So I learned this last year. Tony and I sat down with the rep from JCP&L. There's a sodium vapor light, which are those orange lights you see out in the street, and then mercury vapor lights, which are the bluish ones.
And they don't replace those anymore.
What's that?
They don't do them.
Right, exactly, yeah. So they,
I know, I've seen that lighting handbook, the municipal lighting handbook.
it's some good reading, right, exactly.
It's intense.
And they do the replacements up to 5% of the municipalities' streetlights they'll replace in a year. Now, Middletown has thousands of streetlights, literally. So that number's gonna be hard to reach for them to schedule that. But the savings can be from 2% to up to 36% of the savings as they change these lights out.
And it's completely on them.
It's all on them, and, the biggest saving is on the mercury vapor lights. So you think, well, 2%, how much is that? That's a big deal. Well, I think we pay over $800,000 a year on streetlights in Middletown, so even 2% will be something. So when Tony and I met last year.
I know what you're thinking, both of you.
You know.
I can see where your brain was going instantly.
Well,
These things in
much you think it would
$105,000
save?
intervals these days.
Well, the answer is I don't know how much we can save. We met last year, we thought, well, the train station would be the place where.
Good place to start.
There's
Plus, they need a bunch of lights to be replaced
Yes,
at that
that's
right,
true.
the timing is right.
And we've had some residents complain about it and reach out to us too,
Right,
so
and the
that would be
LED
really
lights
great.
are even a little brighter. So we looked at that, but at the same time, I'm getting an inventory of other lights in town and at the train station to see what type they are, because, we'll have the biggest savings if we replace the mercury vapor lights. So we're gonna try to look through town for those too. So just to let you know that this is something we're looking at, and then, I'll get back to you with some more information as we get that inventory back from JCP.
That would be great. Thanks, Ted.
Okay, any township committee comments?
Okay. Committeeman Perry, would you like to go first this
I'm
evening?
just gonna say one thing. Yesterday, all of us were at Captain Haley Beekman's swearing in at the Port Monmouth Firehouse, a really historic day on two fronts for Middletown yesterday. Haley Beekman being the first fire captain to be sworn in at the
As a
Port Monmouth
female.
as a female. So that was really great for all of us to be at yesterday, and it was just so great to be there with her mom, who was just gleaming and was just a sweet family, and I was really honored to be there. And then Rick Lovato, Super Bowl champion, Middletown High School South, getting his ring, bringing it home, and making Middletown proud. So just congratulations to both of them, and for Middletown to be in the news on both of those fronts, just really amazing. So I just want to congratulate both of them.
Committeeman Fiore.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I totally agree and echo Committeeman Perry's comments yesterday. We also had the opportunity, Committeeman Perry and I, to attend the annual Lions Super Bowl breakfast fundraiser that they do. And just a word about the Lions, they do such great work with vision screenings for the youth here in Middletown through the Middletown schools, and they have some really neat ideas about innovations that they're going to bring to the school nurses to help even move that along. I could say they've actually identified 2 astigmatisms on my daughters, one each that's like their father. So it is working. So both of them got to get classes now. But they do a wonderful job, and it was great to support them. And of course, Ms. Beekman, who makes the fire department very proud, and us as a community to have her in service. The only other thing I'm going to say, and I'll say more about it the next meeting, but clearly there's a void at this table today with our colleague, Dr. Scharfenberger, our esteemed mayor of 6 times on the committee, no longer, offering his resignation to the committee. I personally will, I'll miss him because I will call him every day as a county representative now, but I congratulate him as becoming a freeholder. I think he will do a wonderful job as he's done for Middletown, and he will continue to put Middletown, first within the county, as he's always done, being a great representative for us, and advocate for the things we do. And I wish him the best, and definitely look forward to his eventual replacement, which will happen within, I guess, statutorily 30 days or so. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. So I want to certainly echo my colleagues' comments with regard to great events that we've had in Middletown, and I missed, unfortunately, the Lions event on Sunday morning, but I think when I'd gone the years before, my kids had gotten screened with whatever it is they use there, just to check their eyes. So it's something that we all need to be aware of, but it's a great service that they provide. So with that being said, I'll reserve the rest of my comments until our public meeting.
Thank you. I am actually going to reserve all of my comments for the next meeting. So that being said, we're going to open up to public portion. Is there anyone who would like to make any anybody who would like to make any public comments this evening? Okay, Leo, you know the rules. 5 minutes, name and address.
Leo Kostopoli, River Plaza, Middletown. The ADP, Assessment Demonstration Program, is in its 5th year. I call it the Assessment Demonstration Pilot Program. When I had a conversation with Alex Worth this afternoon, he gave strenuous resistance to my use of the word pilot. And I wonder what the pilot in Middletown is supposed to demonstrate, and now also in Somerset, when 2 other counties were supposed to be included in this trial, this scientific study of an old assessment system and the new Christie system. So Alex Worth said that the Somerset has been doing this for 25 years. I didn't add, but I'll add now, that Monroe Township hasn't done a assessment in 40 years. When I was in Tinton Falls under Mayor McNamara, she never in 16 years had an assessment. They must have only used the tax rate. I'm here because when you establish a system of property taxation predicated on statistical probability, algorithms, algebraic formulas, Carlyle call it the economics, the dismal science. So, but it nonetheless is a science, and they use mathematics. It would seem to me the main problem in science is a problem, quod erat demonstrandum. What has been asked to be proven or demonstrated has been demonstrated and proven. That means you have to have a methodology of statistical study proving that this current system of assessment is better than the previous one, and I think the first consideration is it better for the taxpayers, not for the governments that want money and need money. And so I'm wondering if there's any kind of conversation in this last year, and will there be, if it's an executive, if some information should be gotten out, is there going to be some conversation? Let me just say a last thing. Alex Worth indicated to me, I said this is supposed to be decided in 5 years, because they're going to make a judgment as whether the Assembly and Senate will impose legally this same new system on to from 2119.
They'll never do it as long as Newark and Jersey City have to be reassessed.
Well, Jersey City is,
They're
stuck with it now.
They actually, just,
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, they actually just passed a couple laws, as a matter of fact, just a few weeks ago, implementing a number of provisions of the program on a wider basis throughout the state. And I can tell you from the legal perspective, and I'm sure Colleen could buttress this from a financial perspective, that the expense and cost of tax appeal judgments, which used to brutalize the township's budget, has greatly diminished. And one of the significant reasons why that was such a huge problem, I mean, one year, I think it was 2010 or 11, we had $5 million of tax appeal judgments. And the real problem with that is that when the township has to repeal those judgments, it does not get back the portion that goes to the school districts, which is the vast majority of the tax bill. And the county. But yet the township was responsible for fully funding the entirety of that refund. So from that perspective, it has greatly benefited the taxpayers by keeping the municipal tax rate lower than what it otherwise would have been. Plus, whether you like your assessment or not, it's more equalized playing field, where before some people were paying far too much and others were paying far too little because no adjustments were taking place for changes in the marketplace. Everybody can argue, here or there whether it's...
But I don't know what the net is.
So
I don't know what...
Here's the thing I will say. You are not incorrect in so much that I've seen my own property go up, go down, go up. I don't like the volatility either, and I think that's the problem most residents have if they went up 1 year and down 1 year and up 1 year. And I think that's just, that's a science of mathematics that's hard to emulate. But you asked for incontrovertible truth as to a pilot, and I can tell you the incontrovertible truth that Mr. Nelson speaks of is exactly what happened in the 2008 market collapse and what happened to us in Middletown Township in 2010 and 11 with respect to commercial tax appeals. So we, as a municipality, if you want to use real numbers in cash, which I know you love to speak in cash like I do, but we had about $6 million of tax appeal judgments that we lost in 2010 from AT&T, from places on Route 35, from individual homeowners, whether on Navesink River or North Middletown. We lost about $6 million in tax appeals. $6 million that we received 20% of as a municipal entity. So we took in $1,250,000, right? That's the money we got. So imagine this municipality taking in $1.25 million and paying back $6 million. That was absolutely ridiculous. Now with this program, that stops that. That stops that exposure going forward. And that's the real benefit to this. All the other volatility, yeah, I think we can all agree that's the stuff that none of us like. But that right alone raised taxes dramatically on the municipality versus the places that received the money that never had to pay it back. And you know where those two places are. So that's the real...
But there's a volatility of the loss of income to people who are in the private sector, and the property tax is not based on the ability of the property taxpayer to pay.
But in 2010, when this municipality had to raise taxes 13%, that we all had to choke down because of those tax appeals, that hurt you more than that volatility in terms of your assessment, by a lot. So I will say that's what's prevented now in this program. For all the bad that it might have, that's the good.
Can I make a last statement, please?
We can talk about it after
No,
this, so go ahead.
Leo,
Go ahead.
go for it.
This is addressed more specifically to the new member here, Mr. Perry, is it?
Yes, sir.
Leo Christoffoli. I have suggested, because my property and the property of many other property taxpayers is not productive of cash or money. And so when I ask elected politicians, governing officials, committee people, where do you think I get my money to pay my property taxes if my land is productive, my property is productive of no income, no cash? And the answer is, I get it from my income. So I have made the suggestion to this body before, it's new to you. I say you can solve a lot of problems. You'd have to build a mountain range the size of the Rocky Mountains on the East Coast to get it done. But the idea is to quash all residential property taxes, I don't know about commercial, and get rid of all free enterprise assessment firms, you're saving money, and see as much as possible when you create an income tax system to fund the school board and the municipality and the county. And they have the records. I have to turn my records in. The state has it, the federal government has it, the county probably has it. The only thing the final thing is that if you get rid of this property tax system, you can save a whole lot of money, I bet. There'll be a net, because you have to have a system that collects income taxes from people who pay income taxes to pay the property taxes.
Leo, you and I
Thank
could
you
talk.
for the additional time.
You and I could talk for hours on how we could save a lot of money. So on the state level and other places.
But we're not talking flowers right now.
Yes, but to this point, your article point, real quick. I'm sorry, Mayor. This bill did pass the Senate budget appropriations, but I encourage you, like you said, write, call, because there's still time. It has not passed the Assembly, I don't believe, but it did pass the Senate Budget Appropriations Committee this afternoon. Okay, so just so you know, Leo.
Thank you.
Welcome. Is there any other member of the public wishing to make any public comment? Okay, seeing no members of the public wishing to make any more comments, I move to close public portion and adjourn.
Perry?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Stiles?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
Motion carries to adjourn.
Yes, ma'am.
I believe it was Powers.